This is the Identity Shockwave Podcast, where we explore the journey of self-discovery and the many layers of who we are as we ride this wave called life. 4 questions, real people, endless exploration. I'm your host, Lori Vaitzig. Hey, you made it! Welcome back to the Identity Shockwave Podcast, where we explore all things identity and self-discovery. My name's Lori, and I'm so stoked that you are here. And I'm really excited about today's topic. This one's for the animal lovers. And whether you've had a pet or not, some people can't. They got allergies. They can't have pets. But I bet you that you've had some kind of connection with an animal at one point in your life. And I'm lucky to say that I've had many. I grew up riding horses. Horses have always been something big in my life and my family. I can still remember the names of the horses that I cared for when I was going to summer camp. And the connection that you have between you and a horse is something that's just otherworldly. It's so strong. Not only are they a big presence in their stature, but also in their emotional bodies too. They really just, if you look into a horse's eyes, it's like you can see so much. And maybe that's just me, but I think other horse girls and horse lovers will probably say the same thing. And I also grew up with Jack Russell Terriers. And if you know anything about them, they are super high energy, they have minds of their own, and they're just freaking crazy. But I love them. My sister still has them to this day. And now, I got some cats. And I never was a cat person. I was vehemently against cats. Not against cats, but I didn't know what they were about. I didn't necessarily trust them. I thought that they were going to bite me or scratch me or be mean. And I just didn't know what they were about. I didn't know their vibe. And via the cat distribution system, I now have 2. And I love them. Do they drive me crazy? Sure. Yes, definitely, all the time. But I love them and I have a special connection with them. And I've recently learned that that connection can go beyond just the pets and the good boys and the regular relationship that we have with our animal friends. You can actually communicate with them, and they have a lot to say. And that's what this episode's all about. Today we talk to an animal communicator. And if you've never heard of that before, we'll go over all of that in this episode, and by the end of this episode, I think you'll be a believer. Because animals have a lot to say, a lot to convey, and man, do they love us. They love us so much. I talk a little bit about it in the episode, but I actually had the experience of working with an animal communicator with my cats because, like I said, they drive me crazy. And I'll give you one tidbit that I didn't explain in the episode. My one cat, Toons, told the animal communicator that he felt special about the food that he ate because there's no meat in the house. And guess what? We're vegans. Of course there's no meat in our house, but how would our cat know that? And how would this animal communicator know that and be able to convey that? So that alone just sent me. And I thought it was so hysterical that he thought he was special because he got to eat meat. So that was just part of my experience. It goes way beyond that. And I have such a better understanding of them now and my relationship with them and how I want to communicate with them moving forward. And it will really just improve your relationship with your pet and companions. But beyond the animal communication aspect, our guest today has so much wisdom to share. She's all into the law of attraction, which I am too. She's also the co-host of her podcast, Tea Time with Shayleigh and Amber. And they have some really exciting events coming up. Because when we recorded this episode, it was like months ago. So some of the things that we talk about aren't as topical as they are. Some of the things in the courses that we talk about have already passed, but they do have a retreat coming up this July. I'll link everything in the show notes so you can check it out for yourself, but it's all about reconnecting with yourself through the healing of horses and nature. She also has a level 2 animal communication class that honestly I think is already filled up. But again, I'll link everything in the show notes and definitely keep an eye on her because she is always teaching classes. And I hope to take one myself, too. This is an episode that I have been so excited to share with you. And as I was re-listening to this recording, I was just reminded of all of the wisdom and everything that I gained from this conversation and the feeling that I had walking away from the conversation, and it just like re-lifted me up. So I'm so excited for you to experience it as well. And this is episode 10. 10! Double digits, baby! So be sure to look out for more. Again, please like, comment, share, subscribe, all the things. Thank you so much. I super appreciate all of your support. I can't tell you how much I've been getting out of having these conversations and interviews, and I wouldn't be able to do it without your support, and I do it for you. So thank you so much. I truly, truly, genuinely mean that. So let's get into today's episode. Here's Shayleigh Evans. Shayleigh, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thanks for having me.
So for the listeners out there, I have never actually met or spoken with Shayleigh, but in transparency, she is my sister's, one of her best friends, so I feel like I already know her already, so but it'll be cool to actually like get to know you today.
Definitely.
Even though you know my entire family already.
Yeah, I know.
So to kick things off, I start out with this question. If you could boil it down to a few words, how would you introduce yourself? What's your elevator pitch?
It's so interesting too, because as soon as you get a spin on like a few words, I'm immediately like, oh no, how can I like boil this down?
I know, right?
But yeah, this has come in such a timely space for me though, because for about 7 years now, I have considered myself an animal communicator. And it's been an interesting journey because I have been developing my intuitive senses and I can connect with people and I can see belief systems and I'm a little bit of a medical intuitive and it's been so difficult for me to well, for one, it was hard for me to even admit that I was an animal communicator at first. Like that was such a weird, I worked for Marriott for a long time and I would be like, "Oh yeah, I work for Marriott," and I had been like divorced from them for like 2 years. And because it was just easier. And now that I've like stepped into my power through animal communication, I feel so comfortable in it now. And so I was in that role for a very long time. And now, just this year, I've kind of created this cheeky tagline of life coach for your pet. And that's ultimately like, yeah, what I feel like I am like a life coach for your pet because for pets and their people, I guess I should say, because I've learned so much about how animals are connected to their people and how like many emotions and physical sensations that we have in our physical bodies can manifest in our animals. And I was just coming to this realization that I can't leave the person out anymore. So that's essentially who I am these days.
That's awesome. Yeah, I heard on your most recent one of your most recent episodes on your podcast, Tea Time with Shayleigh and Amber. It seems like you're kind of going through a personal rebrand, if you want to call it, and you mentioned mystic. And I love that word because I feel like it encompasses having your intuitive connection with animals seems to be the modality that you're most drawn to. Is there anyone else, or any other ones that you feel really powerful about or connected to?
Mhm. I'm really invested in theta healing right now. I'm like a serial class taker. Like I sign up for so many classes and I just love learning. And I have done many different classes and for whatever reason, theta healing has really stuck out to me because it's all about your belief systems and your emotions and I really do believe that every source of discomfort in the body, any disease, any illness, it starts with a root emotion. It starts with something you tell about yourself. It starts with something that you're feeling in your body. And if you can get to the source of that and you can say, okay, this is why this is happening. I can identify this. I can soften my resistance around it. And you just start going with the flow of life. Your mind, body, and spirit, they all go together and they follow that. So I started out my animal communication journey really having an affinity for the physical body, which was so amazing. Like I was just able and I still am, but I see it from a different perspective now where I can look at a person or a horse or a dog and I can close my eyes and see what their digestive system looks like. I can see the bacteria in it. I can see the health of their bones. I can tell a quick little story. One of the first readings that I did, this lady was like, something is going on with my horse. I don't know what's wrong with her. And we just got something diagnosed. And I think if you're able to figure it out, like if you're able to tell me what the diagnosis was, I will believe everything else you have to say. And there's just something in animals where they're like, we know what our person needs. And so I was like, oh, I see a cancerous mass in her left front foot. And that was the diagnosis. And since I was able to say that for her, she listened to everything else. And there's just something about going through like probably 5 years of just seeing, I don't want to say just seeing the illness, but that's kind of what I did. I helped people find illnesses and injuries and mysterious things in the animal's body, but I had no emphasis on the emotions and I had no emphasis on how the person was playing into that or even nutrition. So it's really cool how I started learning about all these issues in the body. Really, the turning point was meeting your sister, if I'm honest.
Hmm.
I bought bad hay and I bought bad hay for my horses. I have 4 horses, and she posted on, like, a local Facebook group that she bought bad hay, and I messaged her and was like, "Hey, can you tell me who it was from? Because I would like to not have this issue again." And we just started talking, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, and your sister was so open about what she cares about with the horses," and she's like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and I use an animal communicator, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I am an animal communicator," and we kinda hit it off, and through meeting her, because your sister is so horse first, like, she's never gonna force her horses to do anything, she's very invested
Horses
in.
over people.
Yes, and very invested in the emotional, and she taught me to see them from an emotional space that I never thought I could experience, and truly putting them first and understanding the depths of their emotions. And then that caused me to say, okay, I fully believe that if your horse is constantly having a stomach ache, there are, there's words left unsaid or there. So I started seeing the patterns. And long story short, not to blab, but theta healing is that way, where you find a belief system and you, in a short way of saying it, you work in like one of the seventh planes to release the belief system. It's really cool.
That's amazing. I didn't know it was that in depth. It's so amazing how in our own like human bodies, but also in animals, trauma and emotion is stored in the physical body. And the fact that you're able to tap into that with an animal is so powerful and so incredible. And with that too, I just have to thank you for helping my sister and helping Biggie transfer to the other plane of existence because that was a big deal for our whole family. So thank you for that. And just for everyone listening, Biggie was my sister's horse. She was 28 years old, I believe. And Shayleigh helped her transition to the next phase. And that was really sweet of you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, she was pretty
Yeah.
amazing. And it's kind of cool because Donna, I taught Donna animal communication. Like I've been kind of helping her and teaching her, and she's learned to connect with her own animals. And Biggie sends her hearts and different symbols all the time. And she's been getting all these words and stuff from her horses. So it's really cool how everything comes full circle.
Aw, awesome. Well, since I follow you on Instagram, I saw that you had a recent post about your manifesting journey and how it like unknowingly came to you as a child. And you shared your own writing as a kid, and it was just so sweet because I feel like myself and my sister probably had similar like school projects or journal entries like this, but you were like, I will buy a horse and it will be in 2 years. And like everything you wrote was like very specific about that. So it sounds like this was all, it kind of started developing as like a young child, but when did you actually come to understand what this communication was?
Yeah, it definitely evolved as a child. My stepmom used to call me Snow White because I would just like come in with like baby bunnies or just things like just animals from outside. And I always just have had a connection with them. I would pick up snakes and I just never had a fear of nature. Um, I will say going through my teenage years were pretty tough. Like my mom went through a divorce, we moved, I had to have my horse at a place where I couldn't see him very much. And I had always been pretty connected with my animals up until that point. And then I just went through this space of I, I'm very much in my human mind. My hormones are changing. I am super disconnected. And So I actually ended up spending, for the first time in my life, like life without horses, like my last couple of years of high school. And that was such an interesting time for me. I was just very disconnected from who I am. And speaking of emotions being stored in the body, I had really bad acne as a kid, as a teenager. And working through theta, there was like resentment stored around that, and like not being able to like physically touch horses, and that was like an actual trauma that was stored in my body. And as soon as I was able to release that, my skin cleared up, and it's been clear for like several years now. It's so wild how that happens. But around, I was going to say 2018, but maybe it was a little bit before that, I had a choice of going to vet school. So I was already like in line to go to vet school, but I married my husband at 18, and he's military, and he's like, "Hey, I got into flight school. Like, you can move to Alabama with me, or you can stay in New Mexico and like finish out your school. What do you want to do?" And that was like my life-changing decision. Like, okay, I'm going to leave school and go to this place with you and, put my dreams on hold. But what was really cool about that is I went to a working student internship at a dressage barn, so like an upper level horse barn, and I met a lot of really cool people. And after that, I was very fueled to get my horse Kip. And that's a whole nother story. Like, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but that is where I realized I could talk. Like, he's the one that got me back into this whole energetic side. And he started my entire, like, helped me start my entire business, and really was like the catalyst to like changing my entire life to where it is now.
I recently had a session with an animal communicator because I am on a journey with my two cats that I received via the animal distribution system. And I got one, and then the other showed up, and it's just, they're not really getting along. The most recent one is like desperate to be my other cat's friend, like desperate in his face. My other cat's just like, get away from me. I want nothing to do with you. And so, long story short, I had a really amazing session, and I got a lot of insight from that. And when I told my friends about it, and there were some very, very, very like specific things that how would she have known, like she's clearly was communicating with my cats. However, when I was like telling this to some of my friends, it's kind of a hard sell. If you're not already in that spiritual mode, or, have those types of belief systems, it's really hard to convince people. Do you feel that way sometimes, or is there a way that I can help demystify it to people that think I'm crazy for doing it?
And that is the question, because yes, that was like the foundation of my whole journey. And what I realized is, when I was worried about that, like when I was worried about how I could explain what I did to people, or communicate the information from animals, I was looking for the validation from the other people. Like, I wanted to share it because I wanted that validation. And the animals have just kind of taught me that the validation comes from them, and it doesn't really matter what other people think. And to circle back to talking about manifestation, I am a big proponent for the law of attraction. Like, just what you put out there, the energy that you're upholding, that's what's going to come back to you. So if you have this dominant energy of, you know, I believe this, but I don't really know, or, you have that wobble in your vibration, you're going to naturally end up telling someone who's going to try to rock your boat a little bit. And then it's up to you in that moment to be like, okay, do I actually feel this way? What am I going to accept as my truth? And that's been my biggest journey, is when people are like, no, I don't believe that. Or I actually had someone tell me when I very first started out that I was feeding them estrogen filled bullshit. And I still remember the comment. And I remember like sitting there and like almost like, when someone like you pour your heart and your soul into something, and then someone says something like that, and you like feel like that, like, ugh, like that gut punch.
Yeah.
And then I
Was
remember
this a
telling,
man?
yes, it was a man.
Ugh.
And I was so offended. And then I like just remember telling myself, like, this doesn't have to be my truth. I don't feel this way. And that was like a big catalyst into me really like really being able to see things from an outside perspective. So like, for example, if you were to tell your cat story to a friend and they were like, "Oh, I don't know if I really believe that." You can look at an outside perspective and be like, "Oh, well, that's okay." And you just see them for where they are, you know what I mean? Like, you see that they're on a different journey than you see that they're not in that vibrational energy. But the beauty of it is, the more that you practice that higher vibrational energy, the more you'll kind of have people in your life that are aligned with that, and you won't really have the naysayers anymore. Or you'll just know, like, because I don't know if you've ever had this, but, like, you might have someone in your life that you know is gonna be a naysayer, and then you, like, tell them anyway for some reason.
Mhm.
You're like, "Why did I tell them? I know they're gonna say this to me." And that's just your in my opinion, that's you, like, continuing to build on a lesson that you're learning. So, like, you told this person who you know is gonna make you feel bad, "Why did I do that?" And if you can dig in that and figure out, "Oh, is it validation, or is it the need to feel accepted, or what is it?" Then you can be like, "Huh, that's weird." And next time it happens, you get curious, and then the next time it happens, you don't even think of calling them. It's kinda interesting.
I like having that awareness. I think for me, I constantly need validation. So I'm always either like I feel like I have to convince people of these things or just like know that I'm right in what I say. So I gotta push my ego aside in those
Mhm.
instances. But throughout this journey, have you ever I mean, I'm sure, like, your faith may have wavered one way or the other, but it sounds like you're pretty confident in it, but have you ever felt like a fraud or, like, had imposter syndrome?
Surprisingly, no. And I think it's because I was self-taught from the animals, and animals never make you feel that way. Like, I just had
Hmm.
this unwavering belief that, and another thing too, I don't know, like, if you've ever looked into human design. But
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Man Gen over here.
Okay, yeah, I'm a generator. And my human design is very rooted in, like, my crown chakra, my third eye, and then my root. And so I just have this, and I've got like a very strong sacral energy. So, and I'm a Taurus on top of that. So I just have this, like, very strong sense of, like, I know who the hell I am, and I'm always going to be that way. Like, when I was 4, I was like, I'm never having children. I'm going to have 6 pets. Like, I was just so, like, I mean, you saw that thing that I posted. I was always like, I'm gonna live in a house with a white fence. I'm gonna marry my husband when I'm 18. Like, I just have always had this, like, very specific energy about me. So I've never felt like a fraud or an imposter. I've always known that I'm a little bit of an old soul, and I keep telling people in this lifetime, it's so interesting because it's like I'm in a remembering where everything I learn, it feels like I've learned it before.
Hmm.
And I'm in this, like, state of remembering. And when it comes to the animals, it's like, and when it comes to communication and feeling into people's energy, I just have this sense of being extremely psychic. Where my wobble in my vibration comes in is people pleasing. So,
Uh-huh.
anytime I'm, like, feeling unworthy, or especially when I first started out and I was a little bit like, "Okay, I think I can do this." I know that when I connect to the animals, it feels true, but then sometimes when I relay the info to the person will be like, "No, that doesn't sound good to me," and I would immediately freeze up and be like, "Oh god, I don't know if I can do this. I'm super unworthy." And that was about me really diving into why that affected me and why I was giving my power away so much to other people, and learning to ask the right questions. And that's something that I've just been so fortunate to have animals that, like, kind of knock me on my ass, and they're like, "Why are you taking this as your truth? Why don't you ask a different question?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah." So I've just been really, really guided down this path because I think I'm here to do some really big work, but I can get into a people pleasing mode where I will want I will be afraid to say something to a person because I don't wanna hurt their feelings, or I will get a sense of, I was gonna say awkward. I guess that's the right word. I can be, like, awkward sometimes where I'm like,
Mhm.
like, I don't know how to interact with people, or to be that weirdo in the room. Like, for the longest time, I didn't wanna be a weirdo. It was, like, a hard thing for me to
Yeah.
grasp.
Mhm. I feel that. I embraced being a weirdo, but in that sense, I felt like sometimes it ostracized me a little bit, but I was kind of okay with it always, but in the same sense, the people pleasing, yeah, I'm I'm right there with you. I wanna kinda, shift focus to manifestation, because it sounds like you've had such an incredible experience with this, and the way you described it makes it so tangible and that it really is available to anyone if you allow yourself to open up to it. But you recently said something about cats and how they ask for what they want and then they go into receiving mode. And humans typically ask for what they want, and when they don't get it, they ask for more and more and more. How how did you come about that? Is it something like a cat told you, or how did you come about that? And how can we get ourselves more into the receiving more mode rather than asking for more?
So I follow Abraham Hicks. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but just for maybe those who haven't, Esther Hicks is a medium and she connects to an infinite intelligence, infinite non physical intelligence called Abraham. And they speak about the law of attraction. So I've followed them for a really long time and I've put a lot of the laws of attraction to work in my own life. And the thing about like being in the receiving mode and being in the asking mode, there has to be a balance because obviously, like knowing what we don't want helps us get clarity on what we do want. And
Mhm.
as humans, we are in the asking because we're here, and animals too. Like we ask because we know that we came here to experience contrast, and we're growing our souls and we're evolving as beings together. So if we never asked for anything, or if we were always in the receiving mode and everything came at once, like life would be pretty boring and probably really short. But there's just a balance in being able to understand the feeling that you are looking for when you're asking for something and not asking from a place of lack. So let's say you're trying to
Mhm.
manifest, so you're trying to manifest a more positive relationship between your two cats. But if you're like, it stresses me out so much that my two cats are fighting all the time, I really need them to get along so that I will feel better. You're basically saying, change who you are so I can feel better. And the universe is just going to give you more of this resistance of, I cannot feel better until you change who you are. So if you can come to a place of, their relationship together is not my responsibility, like the way that they feel towards each other is not my responsibility. How am I going to feel when my cats are getting along? Well, I'm going to feel free and I'm going to feel like there's harmony in the house and it's going to feel calm and quiet, and I'm not going to have to clean up the pee that they're peeing everywhere or whatever the case may be. And so you look
Mhm.
for that better feeling thought. And when you think about your cats, you say like, thank you so much for like the times that you do bring peace, and that softens your resistance a little bit. But as humans, we get focused on what is a lot, and we have to kind of like see it to believe it. So when you get,
Mhm.
so you can get into the space where you're journaling and you're all feeling all fluffy and good, and you're like, oh, yes, my cats are amazing. Then you like walk downstairs and one smacks the other one in the face, and you're like, oh, damn it. Like, oh, this is
Mhm.
terrible. That's like totally brings the momentum back. So you just kind of have to be firmly rooted in, how do I want to feel? And also knowing too, and just this is just a little tidbit like for your cats, anytime you say like, don't do that. So don't pee over here, don't fight with your brother or whatever, you are unintentionally sending that image to them. Like you're sending that image of the fight because that's your language that's coming through your mind. So the language is really
Hmm.
important. Animals don't really receive messages in like, don't do this. It like kind of makes me laugh because people are always like, can you tell them not to do this? And I'm like, no, not really, because they have free will. And they also
Yeah.
just don't think in negatives like we do. They don't have that negativity bias like we do. So if you're looking to have more harmony between your cats, like you would say things like, let's have a peaceful morning together. Let's all hang out together on the couch peacefully. Like you would start cultivating the language around that, which will train your subconscious to cultivate the visualization around that. And images are how they connect. So that's what they'll start seeing.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for that. My sister has also taught me how to connect with them via the third eye.
Mhm.
And there have been times that I've done that and I've had incredible results. Like I had a feral cat that recently passed away, and I had not had a breakthrough with him in the 6 years that I had him until my sister taught me how to do that. And she's like, send him an image of what you want to see. And immediately when I did that, he rolled over onto his back and showed me his belly, and he had never done anything like that with me, so it was, like, so good, and I really, really do try with my cats to do that, and I try to show them what I wanna see, but it's work. It is work, especially if you're not grounded in that continuously, like, I'm really fiery, I'm Italian, I have a short fuse, so it's hard for me to stay grounded in those things and to, so what I'm getting at it is work, but it is possible, and I do thank them. I talk to them, I have full-on conversations with them because I can see, like, something is processing in them, like, if we're ever going away, I'm like, "Listen, we're going away, Alice is gonna come take care of you, it's gonna be fine, we'll be back in a week." Like, I feel like it's helpful. I don't know. I feel like, especially cats. I never was a cat person, by the way. We always had dogs. I was afraid of cats. I didn't like cats. And then they just started showing up into my life. And now I understand them. I really understand. They're very powerful creatures, and you have to have a relationship with them, I feel like, in order to get what their vibe is and to pick up on their signals, because they will send you signals for sure, unlike how dogs do.
Yeah, cats are very strong boundary holders, and I think it's kind of funny that you have a cat who represents like your side of needing validation, and then you have this other side that's like very firm in like who they are, and they're like, I'm not going to be the one to give you that validation. And so yeah, it's interesting how we attract those personalities, and I've been so invested lately in I've been writing this little series of posts on Facebook about the foundation because I just went through a little bit of, like, a separation from a close friend of mine, like, we're just not in the same place anymore in our life
Mhm.
experience, and we talked it out, and we're like, "This is just not it's not neither one of us are happy in this friendship, like, I think we, like, need to just kind of go our separate ways." And that was interesting because I always have to relate things to animals, and I was thinking about all my relationships with my animals, and I'm like, "What were those relationships founded in? Like, where was I in a headspace when I got Kip, and what was I thinking about? And just what type of energy was I looking for?" And the more I look into it, the more I'm like, wow, like if I was in a place of like overcoming trauma, I manifested this friend who was in a place of overcoming trauma. And naturally, we grew apart because we both received the lessons that we needed to in the trauma, and we had nothing to bond over anymore. And
Mhm.
it's kind of like that with our animals. So it's crazy how the energy that you're rooted in initially when they come into your life, those stories play out until you learn them. And sometimes that's their lifetime, or sometimes you learn multiple lessons with each animal. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I'm definitely learning a lot from each one of them. So I was reading your Foundation series, which is a series that Shayleigh has on her social media, where you describe your awareness of where you were vibrationally when you first created your relationship with your animal and how that's fueled your entire experience together. And it's really sweet and moving. I think it says a lot to identity. And if we could, if I were to think back on like a friendship and, think of like, the purpose that it served and where I was at, I feel like we'd have such a better understanding of our current relationships. And by the way, the fact that you were able to talk that out with a friend and just come to that mutual understanding is so big and so mature. And I feel like if more people could do that, we would just be happier overall and like not feel like we have to stay in these relationships for whatever obligation. But going back to your Foundation series, I really like how you explained that, like, one of the stories you tell was about your dog, Maisie. And while you love her, you haven't felt a deeper connection like you have with your other animals. And I relate to that because I had a bird, if you can believe it. He's just like my sister. He was a little green cheek. And I rehomed him after 3 years. And as a vegan and an animal advocate, I felt so ashamed and so hurt by my decision, but it was the best situation possible for both of us because now he lives on a farm and he has a dog that's a best friend and other birds and like his life is way better than it would have been here. But I had to come to the understanding that, not every animal, not every person is a good fit and maybe they serve that purpose for a short time in your life. So that was a big lesson for me because, again, like I get so angry when I see people rehoming animals because I think of the stress that it puts them through. So I had a lot of shame and guilt over that decision, but ultimately I know it was for the greater good of both of us. And he served his purpose in my life, and I helped raise him from when he was a little baby until 3 years old. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is, yeah, if we all could have that greater awareness for what certain relationships serve in our life, I feel like just ultimately we'd all be a lot happier.
Mhm. I had a bird too, actually, that like, Donna was the catalyst of me getting, and he almost got me divorced, and my husband never says no to any
Mine
animals.
too.
He was
Yeah.
terrible. He was a holy terror. I mean, he was adorable, but he taught me a lot, and I have a lot to say about I'll try to make this concise because I actually have a very big opinion around rehoming animals and lost animals and all of that. Because as humans, we tend to be in that little bit of an egoic space where we're like, "Oh, we're the end all be all." And because I have an quote intelligent mind, I know what's best for you. And so you have this animal that you're trying to do everything you can for that's giving you all these negative behaviors day in and day out. And it's funny because we have guilt as humans, like, oh, I've failed, or we have fear of abandonment, or whatever it is. No one's going to take care of them the way that I can take care of them. And they're like, I've been trying to tell you for like 2 months, you're not taking care of me the way I want to be taken care of. So I think we have to remember that animals have their own soul journey too, and sometimes they find us as a way to move through us and move to someone else, and they know that they can't get from point A to point C without the B in the middle. And I,
Mhm.
for a long time, had shame around animals too, just rehoming because I was like, oh, it's you get told that as a kid, it's your responsibility. You get an animal, you feed them, you take care of them, they're your responsibility. And granted, I feel like there's a big gray area because there are some people who just don't see the value in who they are, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
mistreatment, and there's all that other BS that we could talk about.
Yeah.
But from the general population that really cares about their animals, like you with the bird or someone having to rehome a dog, I really have come to a place of peace just being able to talk with animals and know that they're like, "Hey, this was my choice too." Like there's a reason why I was presenting this behavior. There's a reason why I was trying to, make all of this noise because I had a choice. Like my bird was like, "I had a choice. I could be nice if I wanted to. I could interact with you and coexist with you if I wanted to, but that wasn't my life path. Like I want to go do something else." So that was a big turning point in my mental health as far as rehoming animals because
Mhm.
it can be kind of tough. And I think the biggest thing too, my biggest lesson in this entire lifetime has been realizing that the happiness that's in our every emotion that we have is our choice, and no one can make us feel a certain way. So when we have these beliefs around, I just need you to be different so that I can feel better. I need these types of friends, or I got to find my tribe or so that I can feel better. It's like using all of this external validation to mask what's missing internally. And if we can all just say, like, I'm whole and complete as I am, if we can find our center as often as possible, it kind of negates all that other stuff. But we kind of live in fear because so many of us, I mean, that's what I think is cool about your podcast and the questions you ask, is so many of us are like, who am I? And without my animals, who am I? Without my career, who am I? And it's
Mhm.
interesting how as a human race, it's like we have to be something or do something in order to like validate our existence.
Yes, yes, that's why we're here, baby. That's why I want to ask these questions because I feel like so many times people tie things to who they are. And but I feel like our souls just speak so much more and maybe in ways that humanly we don't know how to communicate. Maybe one day we'll get there. But to bring the conversation back to identity, what parts of your identity make you most proud and which have you struggled with the most?
I'd say I'm pretty proud of my honesty. I'm someone who, growing up, my sister called me an unintentional asshole because I'm just so brutally honest. And I just always stand in my truth. I always stand in what feels true to me. I'm always going to tell you, where I am. I like to lead by example in that I don't have secrets. I don't like holding anybody's secrets. Nobody tell me a secret. I don't like keeping them. I'm very just open, and what you see is what you get, and I appreciate that because I feel like animals are that way and that's what they need. Like if they're going to trust you, sometimes animals tell me like some deep stuff like, hey, my
Hmm.
person's in a really negative space, like you see her going through a really bad relationship, or a horse will say, my person is way too heavy for me. All of these like deeper stuff, even some of the pain things, an animal couldn't trust me to convey that to someone if they didn't think that I could stand in my own truth. And that's where like you get so many, like you could talk to 10 different animal communicators and get 10 different reads, because in my opinion it's based on how honest you're going to be. And I think that that has made me a really good communicator, because if someone is too heavy for their horse, I'm going to be like, look, this is what they're saying and that's it. And so I'm like that in every aspect of my life with friends and everything. And I used to think it's so funny because I used to be ashamed of that part of me, because people would get offended. They would be like, you lack compassion, you're not compassionate, or you're rude or whatever. And I used to kind of accept that as truth and be like worried about like what I was saying. And now that I'm like on the other side of things, I'm like, no, I'm not compassionate. I'm just stating my piece and you get to accept which part of that is your truth. So it's not my responsibility how you feel, you know what I mean? Not that I'm actively trying to hurt anybody or saying anything like that. Like my intentions are good, but if I say something that feels true to me and it doesn't resonate with you and it hurts your feelings, like I'm sorry, but that's just what I have to say and you can take it or leave it. So that's kind of what I'm proud of. And I think my biggest struggle is the people pleasing aspect, which is like totally in my human design chart. It's like in my numerology, it's in my generational trauma. I've like gone on like this
Mm.
deep dive this year, and it's so interesting. I don't know how much you've dived into like generational trauma and how
I
like
got so much of it.
oh my gosh, it's so
Yeah.
crazy how, like, when you think that your mother's ovaries were developed inside of her when she was in utero in your grandmother, and like just all these, like, so you're not only absorbing like the physical cortisol and the emotions and stuff, but those emotions that your mother held, and then you as a little egg inside of her body, like absorbing all of those emotions. It's wild how that plays down, and I've been really diving into ancestral stuff lately and generational stuff, and realizing, like, not to go too off on a tangent, but recently, like I told you I manifested my husband. I got married at 18. Like I'm 30 now. Like we have an excellent marriage. And yet for whatever reason, this year I started telling myself my marriage is on a shaky foundation and I'm gonna like my husband's gonna die. And for a while I was like,
Oh no.
okay, my husband's gonna die. Yeah, he's in the military, but he's been in the military our entire 13 years of being together. Like, why am I all of a sudden like, oh, he's gonna die? So then I started working with someone with generational trauma, and at my a little older than me, my grandma's husband passed away. Like they got a divorce and her husband passed away. And I was telling myself, like I was telling the person I was working with, I feel like I have a fear of loss. My husband's gonna die and I'm never gonna love again. Like those are the words I said. I'm never gonna love again. And I'm like, how weird. And she never got remarried. She never loved again. And I actually talked to her a couple days ago about that conversation. And she's like, yeah, I have a lot of guilt. I would have kept our marriage together if I knew he was going to leave and then pass away. And so I inherited like some of that generational stuff, and being able to come to that place of, oh, wow, I recognize that this is a pattern in the family. And I was able to trace it back to like my maternal line too. And like we have like generations of women whose husbands either like died, got murdered or divorced or whatever, and they never remarried ever. And it was around
Oof.
like this time in my life. So it's kind of wild how every time you think you learn something and you know about it and you're like, "Oh, I know where I am and my place in the world," or whatever, then you learn something else and you're like, "Oh, wow, I know nothing."
Yeah, I feel like we could have a whole episode on generational trauma because I feel like one of my goals in this lifetime is to break some of those because I think I'm doing a pretty good job. And I think, my sister Donna is aware of it also. And I've also dug into ancestry a lot this year too. Last year I went on my honeymoon to Italy and I've done a lot of research on what it was like for Italians to immigrate to the United States and like what they went through. And I can only imagine the stories and the traumas that have been passed down through our bloodline. So I am doing whatever I can to break the things that have been imprinted upon us. You had alluded to some things earlier on, but I'm curious to know specifically if there was ever a decision that you made that changed the trajectory of your life.
It was definitely like my very first one was marrying my husband and deciding to not go through with vet school and going to flight
Yeah.
school. And when he was in flight school, I we're in Alabama and I didn't want to go to college there. I enrolled in college, like a community college there, and then I got there and I don't know if I should say this, whatever, I'll say it. Like the entire syllabus had like typos on it and I was like, I am not going here. Like if the syllabus has all these typos, I just not to sound
Yeah,
like prude, but I was like, what? Like I'm not going to spend all this money to go here if like there's all these grammatical errors all over the place. So
I
I kind
don't
of got
blame
to
you.
yeah, I got weirded out by it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a year off of college and like see what happens. And then this opportunity popped up for me to go to that dressage barn. So that was like a really big that was a catalyst. Meeting your sister was a catalyst.
Hmm.
And then I guess my most recent catalyst to change where I am now, because now I have this like beautiful business partnership with Amber Leidick, and we have a podcast and we have a membership and we're like traveling the country this year, and it's just like such a beautiful evolution of like my business and my energy journey. I reached out to someone who was hosting a clinic and I couldn't afford going to the clinic. And I said, would you ask this person if I could teach an animal communication class in exchange for going to the clinic? And she was like, yeah, no problem. So I ended up teaching, which it was my very first class. And it's so funny because we're such good friends now.
Ooh.
And like we still laugh. And she's like, I had no idea that was your first class. And I was like, it was your first clinic. It was my first class. Like it was just kind of a cool thing. And so it wasn't necessarily I mean, it was my decision to reach out, but what was really cool, her name's Celeste Lazarus, and what I thought was really cool is she had this, like, really it was an expensive clinic, and she had no obligation to say, like, "Yes, you can come to my clinic and teach animal communication and get into it for free." And she let me, and that decision, like, fueled our friendship, and then she introduced me to Amber, and then she introduced me to someone else, and she got me on all these podcasts, and now my entire trajectory of my business has changed because this one person said yes to me. So it's just crazy how that works out.
That's amazing, and that's really encouraging too, because as I start to branch out to talk to people that I don't know, I'm hoping that, more opportunity will come to that. And I feel like that's just part of the manifesting journey is, doing something that kind of scares you, getting outside of your comfort zone, like, and you're just opening all these different doors and opportunities to come forward. I wanted to mention your business because you do have a manifestation workshop happening right now, and it's coming up soon, yeah?
Mhm.
So I wonder if you can just educate us a little bit more about what that's about and maybe some people be interested to join.
Yeah, so it's at amberlightic.com and it's a week-long little experience. There's a Facebook group which oh my gosh, Amber and I were just talking to each other last night, both like fully crying over the comments in there because we were just like reminiscing, like we had no idea that this little thing would turn into what it is. And we just have such a beautiful community of women that do like a lot of women do our programs like over and over again. Like we have the same people sign up, and we had so many new people sign up for this manifesting thing, and everyone's just been so supportive. And it's a series of videos, journal prompts, meditations to just kind of get clear in your life experience and just kind of taking control over your vibration. It's a lot of awareness. It's recognizing where you're at and where you want to be, and that's like a really cool thing. So, yeah, if people want to join, we're happy to have more people.
That's awesome. And I feel like your life experience is a complete testament to that because it just seems like, you're on such a high vibration and you've been able to create the things you want in your life because you fully believe that they're available to you and that you're worthy of them and that they exist. And I feel like, if myself included, if we had more of that mindset to understand that these things are, if you think it, you believe it, it is there. It is out there in the realm for you to grab and to obtain. It's just going to take some, energetic work to get there, but it's very, very possible. And then I wanted to ask you, it's a really broad question, but again, for those listening that don't quite understand animal communication and don't quite understand how they can maybe have a better relationship with their animals, is there some tidbit of knowledge or advice that you could share that could help us cultivate a better relationship with our animals?
That is a broad question, but
I
what
know.
I will say about that is connecting with our animals is it really is available to everyone. That's why I love teaching. I like opened up a bunch of classes this year because I just love showing people that they can connect. And if you think about it, so everything is energy, right? Like we know the law of energy. We know it can't be created or destroyed. We are all made up of energy. Our body, our cells have energy. And if you think about it in the way of tuning, like your radio dial to 97 FM and aligning with that frequency as you're driving down the road, like you pick up that frequency. And then when you drive out of that range, it gets all scribbly. So I usually tell people in like layman's terms, like it literally is like a radio dial. Like if you can come to a place of being still and tuning to the frequency of your animal, you can pick up what they're saying. And a common misconception, and I think what keeps people from trying, is they feel like they have to completely quiet their mind. But a lot of times animals connect with us through our thoughts. So, those little moments where you're walking through the house and you just randomly get an image of like the dog's water bowl, or you're like, oh, I might need to like check the water or something. That is like, sure, it could be your intuition, but a lot of times it's your animal saying, like, hey, my water bowl is empty. Or, you just get little like inklings, little intuitive hits. That's how it starts. And the trusting it comes from kind of putting that into practice. And the best way to do that is cultivating a gratitude practice at the beginning of every day, because gratitude is something that uplifts your vibration to like a vibration of love. And like that love heart energy is where our animals connect from. Like that's just where they live. So if you can spend like 5 minutes a day, just like really deep in gratitude, and then think about something that you feel like you need to ask your animal, or, just create an image of your animal in your head and just say, what would you like to show me? And just trust what comes up. And if you can trust what comes up and write it down, whether you trust it or not, your animal will give you evidence throughout like your experience in the next like 24 hours or whatever of what they said. And sometimes it can be the weirdest thing. Like you can get like an image of like a squash, or you're like, okay, that's weird. Like, or I'm seeing a pumpkin. That's weird. I don't think I know anything at all. And then next thing you know, like you might see an image that you don't think means anything. But if you stay open minded enough, you can ask another question. So like, what does this mean? And they will like hone you in on like the color. And then you'll be like, okay, what about the color? Then they'll send you a feeling like, okay, this feels like strength, or this feels like whatever. And that's how it builds. So really
Mm.
just, yeah, trying not to reject any thoughts and feeling like you have to get into like that quiet space. You can totally just get into a moment of gratitude and ask what you need to ask. But one thing that I will say to preface that is they are kind of like us sometimes, where they don't want to always answer questions all the time, like if especially if it's something that pertains to us, like why are you fighting with your sister? And like if that's the first thing that you say to them when you try to connect, they're going to be like, I may or may not answer this. Like I don't like, do you
Mhm.
actually want to know about me, or is this your human agenda? So what I like to start out with is, who are you? Like that is my deepest thing, because I fully believe we should never assume who others are. Like we're changing every single day. you and I will have a different perception of ourselves tomorrow as we do than we do today. And so I like to start out every connection with, who are you today? Like, what would you like to tell me about yourself? And it just opens that energy for you to really like see them and hear them and care about them. And when you feel that energy, then you can ask a question and you just won't have a doubt about it. And it's funny because people are going to listen to this and be like, okay, she's just saying that because she practices it. But it's such a true thing. Like, if you're really connecting from a space of, I truly want to know who you are, they will open the door for you.
Mm. Yeah, I feel like everyone should try this. It's attainable to everybody, and it speaks so highly to identity, both with who we are and exactly what you're saying, the human agenda. What are we trying to get out of this? And also who our animals are, because they will show us. They will definitely show us. My cat shows me his confidence every freaking day. Well, how I like to end this is I like to circle back to the first question. After having all this conversation, would you still introduce yourself and identify yourself in the same way that you did in the beginning of this episode?
Definitely. I definitely feel like a life coach for pets and their people is kind of my role right now. It might be different in a month, might be different in a few weeks, but that's kind of what I've landed on now, just helping people realize their truth, realize their potential, the connections between animals and their people. It's just such a real thing, and yeah, feels good.
That's beautiful, and what a beautiful part of the human experience it is that we can shift and we can change and we can evolve, and I look forward to continuing to evolve and have a stronger relationship with my pets. So
Yes.
thank you so much, Shayleigh. I appreciate this conversation so much.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to the Identity Shockwave podcast, hosted by me, Lori Vaitzig. Catch us next time for a new episode with a different guest that is sure to keep the conversation interesting. A big thank you to Let Me Crazy for letting us use their music. I'll catch you later.